Something ugly has happened to a lot of American restaurant chains. They stopped treating customers like people and started treating them like margin. That is why so many places now feel weirdly hollow, no matter how polished the branding looks. The food gets thinner, the service gets colder, the room gets sadder, but the prices keep rising, the promos get louder, and the corporate language gets shinier, as if a cleaner slogan can hide a worse experience. It cannot. In this video, we are going to look at 7 U.S. restaurant chains that got too greedy, pushed too far, and are now paying for it in the ugliest way possible. 1. Starbucks. Starbucks did not just get expensive, it got insulting. What used to feel like a small ritual now feels like paying premium money to stand inside a very polite traffic jam. You walk in hoping for coffee and a few calm minutes. What you get is a counter drowning in mobile orders, a pickup area packed with sweating plastic cups, names barked into noise, and baristas moving like warehouse staff trying to stop a conveyor belt from jamming. The room still smells like coffee, but it no longer feels like a coffee house. It feels like a fulfillment center with better branding. That is the real scam here. Starbucks still wants the aura of a premium brand while delivering an experience that grows more mechanical, more crowded, and more detached every year. The company pushed harder into app orders, rewards, customization, and throughput because those things look great in a corporate deck. They are measurable, they scale, they squeeze more dollars out of every rush hour. The problem is that none of that makes the place more pleasant for the person actually standing in the store. Mobile orders had become a bottleneck, with drinks piling up faster than customers could collect them, eroding the personal touch for in-store guests. Starbucks stopped serving people and started processing volume, and customers can feel it immediately. You are physically in the shop, yet somehow you are already behind a line of invisible people staring at their phones somewhere else. The staff are not really hosting you, they are surviving a queue. The menu is bloated. The flow is awkward, the room is noisy, and the price still lands with the confidence of a luxury purchase. That is what makes Starbucks so annoying now. It is not just that it costs more, it is that the brand keeps charging you as if it still deserves the old emotional value after draining that value out of the room. And no, the explanation does not rescue them. Yes, the company chased efficiency because efficiency is easier to measure than warmth. Yes, app engagement, ticket growth, and order volume are simpler to present than comfort atmosphere or human rhythm. But that just makes Starbucks look worse, not better. It means the company knowingly optimized the parts customers do not love and neglected the parts they actually came for. Starbucks itself admitted in its fiscal 2024 results that it was dealing with a challenged customer experience, and Reuters reported that the turnaround plan involved trying to restore basics like seating, ceramic mugs, condiment bars, and faster waits. When a company has to reintroduce the idea of feeling like a cafe, that is not innovation, that is a confession. And now, the bill is here. In Q1 fiscal 2025, U.S. comparable sales fell 4%, driven by an 8% drop in comparable transactions, even as average ticket rose 4%. In Q2 fiscal 2025, North America comparable sales still slipped. 1% transactions fell another 4%, and average ticket rose 3%. In plain English, Starbucks was extracting more money from each order while giving fewer people a reason to show up. North America operating margin also fell sharply in Q2 as the company spent more labor to patch the mess. Starbucks later cut 1,100 corporate roles during the turnaround, and even when U.S. comparable transactions finally turned positive again in Q1 fiscal 2026, margins were still under pressure from the cost of rebuilding the experience it had stripped down in the first place. So, yes, Starbucks got greedy. But the ugliest part is not the pricing, it is the arrogance. They turned coffee into crowd control, then acted surprised when people stopped treating that as a treat. 2. Wendy's. There was a time when Wendy's felt almost embarrassingly simple in the best way. Hot square burgers, decent portions, a place that did not need to flatter you, trick you, or dress itself up like an event. It just had to be solid. That was enough. Now look at it. Wendy's feels less like a fast food chain trying to serve people and more like a machine trying to shave a little more dignity off every transaction. You walk in and the whole place feels thinned out, The lighting is cold, the counter feels lifeless. The service is not always disastrous, which almost makes it worse because the real irritation comes from something more gradual. Everything feels a little smaller, a little drier, a little less generous, a little less human. The food arrives wrapped, stacked, and processed with all the emotional warmth of a billing department. And then the price lands with the confidence of a place that still thinks it has earned your trust. That is the part Wendy should be ashamed of. This was supposed to be a brand built on straightforward value and basic competence. Instead, it let too many locations become stale, outdated, and draggy while still expecting customers to keep showing up out of habit. Even Wendy's own leadership admitted many of its restaurants were out of date and interim CEO. Ken Cook said some locations did not elevate the brand and were a drag on both franchisee performance and the customer experience. Think about how bad that sounds. What exactly were they preserving all these years? What did they protect? What values did they bother to keep alive? Because this is not just about a few weak stores. It is about a company that stopped knowing what made it worth visiting in the first place. Wendy's used to have a clear identity, cheap, familiar, reliable, unpretentious. Now it feels like a brand that has spent too long staring at margins, promos, and quick fixes and not enough time asking the most humiliatingly basic question: why should anyone still feel good about eating here? Why should customers keep giving this chain the benefit of the doubt when the experience keeps getting flatter and the value keeps feeling more forced? Why does a company that leans so heavily on the language of freshness and quality now sound like it is begging people to notice a coupon instead? And the price of that rot is now painfully visible. In the first 9 months of 2025, Wendy's U.S. same-store sales fell 4%, while revenue fell 2% and net income dropped 6%. Then the fourth quarter got even uglier. Wendy's reported U.S. same-restaurant sales down 11.3% for the quarter and down 5.6% for the full year 2025. U.S. system-wide sales fell 5.2% for the year. Total revenue fell 3.1%. Operating profit fell 7.5%. Net income fell 15.1%. U.S. company-operated restaurant margin also dropped from 16.5% to 12.7% in the quarter. That is not a rough patch. That is a brand being forced to eat the consequences of years of erosion. So now Wendy's is closing stores again after already shutting 240 U.S. locations in 2024 and another 28 late in 2025, with plans to close roughly 298 to 358 more underperforming U.S. restaurants in the first half of 2026. And honestly good, because a brand that cannot protect its own core values, that lets its stores age into irrelevance, and that keeps asking customers to tolerate a thinner, sadder version of what it used to be, does not deserve automatic trust anymore. Wendy's is not just struggling, Wendy's is being exposed. 3. Applebee's. Can you believe it? Applebee's has really fallen this far. This used to be one of those chains that felt impossible to kill. Not glamorous, not brilliant, just solidly planted in the American landscape, a big parking lot, a glowing sign, a neighborhood grill where people could drift in, split an appetizer, order something sticky and oversized, and feel like the place at least understood its own job. Now the whole thing feels like a brand caught pretending it is still alive. The sign is on, the booths are there, the slogans are polished, but the energy is gone. The room feels half occupied, even when it technically is not. The light feels flat. The bar TVs are still blinking, but more out of routine than excitement, and the numbers behind that mood are ugly. Applebee's domestic same-restaurant sales fell 5.9% in the third quarter of 2024, fell another 4.7% in the fourth quarter, and were still down 0.4% in the fourth quarter of 2025. Dine Brands also projected fewer net Applebee's restaurants in both 2025 and 2026. And no, that does not happen by accident. Chains do not end up looking this tired unless they have spent years taking shortcuts and calling it strategy. Applebee's leaned hard on off-premise business, which made up 21.7% of sales mix in Q3 2024, 21.6%, in Q4 2024 and 23.0% in Q4 2025. That may help push orders through the system, but it also helps explain why the place feels less and less like a casual dining restaurant and more like a branded dispatch point for reheated convenience. You can feel those shortcuts in the experience. The food lands fast, but not proudly. Sauces are glossy in that suspicious way that suggests they are doing too much of the emotional work. The menu still wants to look indulgent, but the whole thing feels engineered to survive transit discounting and indecision, rather than to actually delight anyone sitting at the table. The service has that weary procedural tone chains slip into when the mission quietly changes from hospitality to throughput. And that is the most annoying part. Applebee's keeps trying to coat all this in cheerful language about value, menu strength, and guest experience as if better adjectives can rescue a thinner reality. Dine's own updates kept talking about enhancing the guest experience, strengthening value platforms, and improving food quality, service portion sizes, and off-premise order accuracy. That is not reassuring. That is practically a list of everything customers had already started doubting. And still they kept sweetening the messaging, meal deals, bigger wording, cleaner value story, more promotional framing. Honestly, that may be the most irritating thing Applebee's does now. If a brand is struggling, fine, say it, fix it. Do not keep smiling through the damage like a realtor trying to sell a house with water in the walls. Applebee's keeps wrapping itself in this friendly, neighborly, affordable glow while the actual experience underneath feels increasingly drained. Even when sales improved a bit in parts of 2025, the chain still ended the year negative in Q4, and one large franchisee filed for Chapter 11 in March 2026 after closing restaurants in recent periods. That is not the profile of a brand that has solved anything. So yes, Applebee's is still standing. But standing is not the same thing as being okay. Right now, it feels like a tired shell of a once reliable chain still hiding behind glossy language, while the truth is sitting right there in the dining room. And at some point, that becomes unforgivable. Because if Applebee's cannot be more honest, more careful, and more genuinely committed to food and service that feel real again, then this brand is not headed for a comeback. It is headed for the hole. 4. Cracker Barrel. Some brands do not collapse because the food suddenly becomes inedible. They collapse because one day they get embarrassed by the very thing that made people love them in the first place. That is exactly what Cracker Barrel did. This was never just a restaurant. It was a mood, a pit stop with gravity. Dark wood-cluttered walls, old signs, heavy chairs, a little dust in the atmosphere, a little chaos in the details, and that unmistakable feeling that the place had been sitting there forever waiting for you to wander in. It was not sleek. It was not modern. That was the point. And then corporate decided this old soul needed to be fixed. Under CEO Julie Masino, Cracker Barrel pushed a transformation plan that included remodeled stores, brighter interiors, lighter walls, more comfortable seating, simplified decor, new menu items, and eventually a stripped-down logo that removed both the man leaning on the barrel and the words, Old Country Store. And that is where the irritation starts turning into contempt. Who asked for this? Who goes to Cracker Barrel hoping it will feel cleaner, softer, brighter, and more generic? Who looks at a chain built on nostalgia and says, yes, what this really needs is less character. They were not preserving a legacy, they were bleaching it. They took a place people associated with warmth, clutter, memory, and a certain kind of unpolished comfort and started sanding it down into something easier to explain in a boardroom. The result sounds harmless on paper, but in the room it is bleak. Less texture, less weight, less story. Less of that slightly worn, slightly crowded, deeply recognizable atmosphere that made the place feel like somewhere instead of anywhere. And the most insulting part is that they still tried to talk about it in that glossy, managerial tone companies use when they know they are making people miserable. Even after the backlash, Cracker Barrel kept describing the broader transformation as if this were all just part of a normal adjustment cycle. But by September 2025, it had already reversed the new logo and paused the remodel program after fierce customer criticism. The company itself said, "Many parts of the remodel did not reflect what guests loved about the brand. That is not a minor tweak. That is an admission that they walked into their own house with a corporate toolkit and started tearing out the beams. And now, they are paying for it." In its fiscal 2026 outlook, Cracker Barrel said it expected traffic to decline by 4% to 7%, and it also made clear that capital spending would no longer go toward new remodels. Then the numbers got uglier. In Q1 fiscal 2026, total revenue fell 5.7%. Comparable restaurant sales fell 4.7%. Retail sales fell 8.5%. And the company posted a net loss of $24.6 million. In Q2 fiscal 2026, revenue fell another 7.9%. Comparable restaurant sales dropped 7.1%, retail sales dropped 9.2%, guest traffic fell 10.1%, and net income for the first 6 months of the fiscal year turned into a loss of $23.3 million. Management explicitly cited negative publicity around the logo and remodel as one of the headwinds hurting results. So, no, Cracker Barrel did not stumble because it was too old. It stumbled because it started acting ashamed of being old. And that is fatal when your entire brand is built on memory. Once a place like this starts apologizing for its own identity, what is left is just a room that serves food. A little brighter, a little cleaner, a little more efficient, and vastly more pointless. 5. Denny's. Some restaurant chains do not die in one loud, dramatic collapse. They just keep fading. The booths get emptier, the rooms get colder, the food gets flatter. The whole place starts to feel like a habit nobody actually enjoys anymore. And by the time the company finally admits there is a problem, the brand has already been rotting in plain sight for years. That is Denny's now. What used to feel like a dependable American diner open late, bright through the night, always ready with coffee pancakes in a booth. When nothing else was open now feels like a chain that has been running on fumes for far too long. You can see that decline before you even sit down. The sign is still there, still trying to glow with the confidence of an American institution, but the feeling is gone. The parking lot is not empty enough to be shocking, just thin enough to feel sad. Inside, the lights feel flat. The seats feel worn. The room has that strange hush of a place that is technically open but spiritually finished. You hear silverware air conditioning, a few half-hearted conversations, and not much else. It does not feel bustling. It feels preserved. And the numbers behind that mood are brutal. In October 2024, Denny's reported its 5th straight quarter of year-over-year declines in same-store sales and announced it would close 150 of its lowest-performing restaurants by the end of 2025, about 10% of the system. The company's own development chief admitted that many of these restaurants were simply very old. And that is exactly the point. Denny's did not get here because of one bad campaign or one stupid menu gimmick. It got here because it spent too long mistaking age for durability. It kept acting like being familiar was enough, like customers would keep showing up forever just because Denny's had always been there. Meanwhile, some stores aged badly, some locations stopped making sense, and pandemic-era traffic shifts never fully reversed. Denny's itself admitted that some restaurants were no longer in good locations and others had been permanently affected by those traffic changes. So, what were they waiting for exactly? Did they think a 70-year-old chain could just keep getting more tired, more outdated, and more irrelevant without anyone noticing? Did they think customers would keep confusing neglect with nostalgia? And the experience tells on them the food is not always terrible. That is almost what makes it more depressing. It just feels completed rather than made. Eggs, pancakes, hash browns, bacon, coffee refills, all the familiar diner pieces are still technically there, but the comfort has drained out of them. Nothing feels proud. Nothing feels fresh. With conviction, nothing feels like it was served by a chain that still believes in the role it once played. Even the bright spots Denny's pointed to were revealing for all the wrong reasons a value menu that helped recent sales and delivery-only side brands like Bonda Burrito. That is not the language of a thriving diner brand. That is the language of a company trying to squeeze utility out of a concept that no longer carries enough emotional weight on its own. And now, the bill is here. Family dining, the category Denny's competes in, has lost more traffic than any other restaurant segment since 2020, according to the company's own remarks reported by AP. Customers squeezed by restaurant inflation are drifting toward fast food and fast casual instead. Then, in November 2025, Denny's agreed to be taken private in a $620 million deal after all this decay had already become impossible to ignore. That is not a triumphant next chapter. That is a handoff in the middle of a cleanup job. Denny's does not feel like a brand preparing for a comeback. It feels like a brand that let time eat through its identity so slowly that people stopped expecting anything from it at all. And for a diner chain built on presence, comfort, and reliability, that is almost the same thing as disappearing. 6. Red Robin. Red Robin started behaving like a chain that saw every table as a math problem. Not a family, not a night out, not a reason for people to relax and enjoy themselves, just a unit, a check average, a margin opportunity, a line in a spreadsheet that needed to look a little better by the end of the quarter. And that is exactly how a restaurant begins to die without making much noise. Because when you strip away the branding, that is what Red Robin's story has looked like. In fiscal 2025, the company's average check per guest rose to $18.76, up 5.3% from the year before. That sounds tidy, efficient, responsible, the kind of number a corporate deck loves. The uglier number is what happened at the same time guest traffic fell 3.8% for the year. In other words, Red Robin found ways to collect more money from each person who still showed up while giving fewer and fewer people a reason to show up in the first place. That is not healthy pricing power. That is the slow, smug logic of a company leaning harder on the customer who has not walked away yet. And you can feel that kind of thinking in the experience. The room may still look casual and family-friendly on paper, but the whole thing gives off the energy of a place being optimized rather than cared for. The burger arrives, the fries arrive, the refillable gimmicks are still there, but something in the atmosphere feels tighter, flatter, less generous than it should. Not necessarily because every plate is bad, but because the brand feels like it is working backwards from financial targets instead of forwards from hospitality. The company's own First Choice plan talked openly about operational excellence, cost efficiency, and fixing deferred maintenance and guest-facing surroundings. That is not a reassuring list. That is a polite way of admitting the place had already been allowed to feel worn, underinvested, and overly managed. And then comes the most annoying part. Even after all that, Red Robin still wants to sound like it is offering value, joy, and abundance. In fiscal 2025, it leaned on the Big Yum Burger deal to reinforce its value proposition. Think about how revealing that is. First, the check climbs. Then traffic falls. Then the chain has to turn around and reassure people that no, really it is still a good deal. That is not confidence. That is a company trying to patch over the emotional damage caused by its own pricing and operating choices. And the numbers kept telling the same story quarter after quarter. In Q3 2025, menu pricing added 4.0%, but traffic declined 5.6%. Comparable restaurant revenue excluding loyalty deferrals still fell 1.2%. Even when margins improved, the dining room kept losing human beings. Red Robin got too greedy, just not in the cartoon villain way. It got greedy in the cleanest, most corporate way possible. It kept squeezing for efficiency pricing and profitability while the room slowly emptied out around it. By late 2025, the company was still refinancing debt, still leaning on turnaround language, still trying to sell discipline as if discipline were the same thing as warmth. It is not. And if Red Robin does not relearn that a restaurant is supposed to feel generous before it feels optimized, then this chain is not heading toward a revival. 7. Red Lobster. Red Lobster humiliated itself. This was not some innocent mistake or one rough season. This was a chain, so desperate, so addicted to the fantasy of easy traffic that it took a gimmick and turned it into a financial weapon against its own body. The whole thing is almost insulting in how stupid it was. Ultimate Endless Shrimp was supposed to be a flashy little crowd pleaser. Instead, Red Lobster let it become a year-round promise at a price that barely respected basic math. Former CEO Paul Kenny made the $20 Endless Shrimp deal permanent in May 2023 despite significant pushback from the management team. Not caution, not concern, significant pushback. So they were warned. They knew this smelled wrong, and they did it anyway. That is what makes this story so satisfying and so embarrassing at the same time. This was not bad luck. This was arrogance. It was the kind of corporate greed that convinces itself it is being clever. Just flood the room. Get people in the door. Drown them in shrimp. Worry about the consequences later, except later arrived very quickly. Reuters reported that the promotion caused about $11 million in losses and even triggered shrimp shortages at some locations. Think about how pathetic that is. A seafood chain of all places running out of shrimp because it got drunk on its own promo logic. Customers were not being welcomed into a thriving brand. They were being lured into a company burning through its own inventory to create the illusion of momentum. And when a restaurant gets that desperate, you can feel it in everything. The food is not abundance anymore, it is bait. The dining room is not hospitality anymore, it is a trap dressed up as generosity. Endless Shrimp sounds fun on a TV ad, but in practice it becomes a symbol of a chain trying to replace real value with sheer volume. The plate stops feeling like a meal and starts feeling like a corporate stunt. And that is what Red Lobster reduced itself to, a place so hungry for a quick traffic hit that it forgot restaurants are supposed to make money on purpose, not gamble with their own bloodstream. That promo was not bold. It was desperate, wearing a fake smile. The uglier truth is that this was only the loudest symptom of a much sicker company. In its bankruptcy filings, Red Lobster blamed poor management decisions, high inflation, unsustainable rent costs, and increased competition. It posted a $76 million net loss in 2023. Before filing for Chapter 11 in May 2024, it had already shut down 93 restaurants to cut costs. So the Endless Shrimp disaster was not some random accident. It was what happened when a weak company already under pressure decided the answer was to act even weaker. Instead of discipline, it chose spectacle. Instead of fixing operations, it chose an all-you-can-eat hallucination. And now, look at the bill, Chapter 11. About $300 million in debt, a bankruptcy sale, Fortress taking control, more than $60 million in new funding needed just to try to revive the brand. By September 2024, Red Lobster got court approval to emerge under Fortress ownership with 544 current locations kept open after the chain had already closed 93 before bankruptcy. So yes, the company survived on paper, but surviving after you have to crawl through court, close dozens of locations, hand the keys to your lenders, and ask for rescue money is not vindication. It is a public verdict. Red Lobster got too greedy, too dumb, and too desperate. And in the end, it turned a plate of shrimp into a bankruptcy exhibit. If there is one lesson in all of this, it is that customers can forgive a lot, but they do not forgive being quietly exploited forever. The moment a restaurant stops protecting its food, its service, its atmosphere, and its honesty, decline is already underway. That is the warning here. A brand can cut corners, dress up the damage, and buy a little more time, but if it keeps choosing greed over sincerity, the ending is always the same. Emptier rooms, weaker trust, and a fall it fully earned.